That wolf pack in Yellowstone really knows what it's doing. Predators are chasing a big bull elk, but just when one of the wolves is about to catch it, the elk spots a checkpoint, a river with icy water, and that's it. The elk wins because it's smarter than the pursuers, so it stays alive. But each checkpoint has its quirks. They can either save the day or spell doom for the prey chased by predators. Wow, what an intriguing video that'd make. Not all animals know about these secret areas, but those who do will never fall prey to predators. These are the herbivore checkpoints, where predators cannot get them. They say I'm the master of being subtle, so here I am, gently reminding you to hit the like button before it slips your mind. Winter is wolf time. They get boosts of strength and stamina while their prey, the elk, get weaker. In this state, it's easier to corner the elk, and wolves almost do. The only hope for the elk is the river. Usually, wolves don't mind water, maybe even enjoy it. But not in winter. Wolves won't risk plunging into icy water because they could easily freeze to death. But even if they did, elk have another advantage. When they're in the river, their antlers are at the same level as the wolves on the bank. No predator would dare jump straight at those antlers. So, on top of everything else, elk hide their vulnerable spots underwater. You'd be surprised, but it's hard to bite someone underwater, especially when you need to breathe. It's important to note that cold rivers pose a deadly threat to elks too. They're at risk of freezing and frostbite. But unlike wolves, elks don't have a say. They either brave the river or become prey for the pack. So the river serves as a refuge, a safe point to catch your breath and gather strength before making your escape. Also, the wolves might grow impatient and seek out an easier meal. This matters because predators' energy is always running low, and failed hunts are a drain on their limited resources. However, the elk must be cautious at this checkpoint. The river can easily become a deadly trap. As animals grow weaker from the cold, take a closer look. You can see the bones and antlers of those elks that spent too much time in the water. However, things turned out well for the elk. Though the wolves didn't go far, they didn't chase it either. It's better to wait until winter's in full swing. That's when the big prey will weaken enough to become wolf food. Or maybe the wolves starve to death. Sure, these kinds of checkpoints aren't just in Yellowstone or just in winter, or else we'd have a planet full of predators. The animals in the video are African wild dogs, and those little antelopes are klipspringers. On February 22nd, 2022, the rangers at Mala Mala were lucky to spot klipspringers at their checkpoint on the edge of a cliff. It's not the first time animals have used this spot to hide from predators, and you can see why. Climbing up the cliff actually does the trick. While some wild dogs kept watch below, not showing much interest, younger ones attempted to reach the klipspringers. But nature didn't give them the right kind of pause for that. Klipspringers have hooves designed to provide maximum grip, allowing them to climb steep rocks and stay put even on nearly vertical surfaces. Physics? What physics? Those laws only seem to work for African wild dogs. Eventually, they seemed to realize this, gave up, and went hunting for larger antelopes that can't climb rocks and balance like that. The klipspringers deliberately chose such rocky places, an extra assurance that you won't be eaten. Sometimes African wild dogs also don't have much luck with other antelopes. This is mainly because, unlike wolves, they don't enjoy swimming or even being in water. And antelopes understand very well that a body of water, especially a deep one, is their checkpoint. To escape the chasing pack, they head into the water, taking advantage of their larger size to go deeper while still being able to stand on the bottom. Meanwhile, for the African wild dogs to reach their potential prey, they'll have to swim. But they're not keen on swimming. Trying to hunt while swimming is quite the challenge, unless you're some kind of orca or crocodile. Don't forget about the antlers. When an antelope stands in the water with predators on the shore, its antlers are just the right height to jab at the boldest one. Even if African wild dogs try to swim to the antelope, they usually quickly realize two things: that it's a bad idea and that the water is just too deep. There are also water bucks whose lives are closely tied to water. They can't handle getting dehydrated in hot weather, so they tend to hang out near water sources. And whenever they sense even the slightest threat, these water bucks dive into the nearest body of water. They do this all the time, not just as a last resort. Moreover, water acts as a safe zone, protecting not only against African wild dogs, but also many other predators like cheetahs and even lions. Meet the water chevrotain, who figured out long ago that ponds can save its life. Despite being the largest animal in its family, it's still tiny, measuring just 14 inches at the shoulder. These little guys live in tropical Africa, where they've got loads of predators hunting day and night. Nowhere is truly safe for the water chevrotain, but they found a good checkpoint where they can save water. That's their safe haven, where they can dive, swim, and even hold their breath underwater for a whopping 4 minutes. Of course, it's not easy for them, and afterward, they're pretty exhausted. Can't blame them, though. To put it in perspective, most untrained people can hold their breath for about 60 to 80 seconds, while trained ones manage around 1.5 to 2 minutes. However, not all predators lose their appetite for prey that dives underwater. This crowned eagle, for instance, realizes that the water chevrotain will need air soon, making it vulnerable when it surfaces. So the prey has to get extra creative. The water chevrotain dives but tries to resurface elsewhere, far from the predator. Even if it's tough, because underwater, these creatures, well, they're not exactly swimming. They typically move along the bottom, like hippos. However, all these instances are natural checkpoints created by nature itself. But what about the unexpected ones? Take, for instance, a penguin in Antarctica being chased by an orca in the Gerlache Strait. It decided to take matters into its own flippers and simply hopped on a boat full of tourists. I don't know who was more surprised, the penguin, the orca, or the tourists. But the bird spent some time in the boat until it apparently decided the coast was clear. After that, the penguin casually returned to the water. At first glance, this might seem like a really strange behavior driven by desperation. However, simply observing the penguins and their usual way of handling dangerous situations can shed some light on the matter. When there aren't any boats around, but there are orcas instead, which happens a lot more often, penguins, well, they just hop onto whatever they can. Whether it's land, like a shore, or just an iceberg, the idea is simple. Predators like orcas or sea lions are less likely to catch a penguin on the surface. Basically, the penguin probably realized things were going south, saw an orca nearby, found no land nearby, and just jumped where it could. This technique actually has a name among scientists. It's called the porpoising. And sometimes penguins do land on small boats. It happens rarely enough to make the news, but often enough to warrant a suggestion. So if a penguin hops into your boat, just stay calm and wait for it to find its way back into the water. It usually doesn't need any help. Shrimp scadfish have taken their checkpoint game to the next level, going for living beings instead of objects or locations. The Versariga and Nadiomene jellyfish themselves are quite a sight, with their umbrella-shaped bells spanning up to 24 inches across. But the real magic happens under the bell, where you'll find a swarm of small fish seeking refuge. They're using the jellyfish as protection from the trumpet fish lurking around. But isn't that risky for the shrimp scadfish? Definitely. They have no immunity to jellyfish toxin, so they have to be extremely cautious and avoid touching any stingers. Despite all the risks, around 10 small fish can squeeze under a single jellyfish, where they stay until they mature. It's worth mentioning that this mobile checkpoint isn't just used by this fish species. Scientists have noticed crabs, sea spiders, brittle stars, even turtles using them. Here's another example. Fish inside a jellyfish, this time along the French Riviera. It's pretty much the same deal. The jellyfish is doing its thing, and the fish have found a safe zone inside to hang out. But what's really interesting is what's going on with these salps. Salps are perhaps some of the weirdest creatures drifting in our oceans. They're not jellyfish, even though they kinda look like them. These creatures are known as planktonic tunicates. Basically, salps are living sacs that float around and feed by sucking in water from the front and squirting it out from the back. Watching them, you might think a salp accidentally swallowed a fish, but in reality, the fish willingly entered inside. It's a safe zone. Plus, it's mobile without the risk of getting stung. Sort of like a fortress with panoramic windows. Certain fish from the carp family have gone a step further. They actively seek out sea cucumbers by scent and then plunge headfirst into their back end. Even if the cucumber tries to fight back, it's useless because it breathes through that opening, inevitably getting exposed. No matter what sea cucumbers think about it, small slender fish consider their rear ends a great safe spot, which they use constantly, and even fight off rivals trying to claim the same hole. The anal cavity isn't exactly the coziest spot, mainly because it produces compounds called saponins. I won't go too deep in the chemistry side of things, but fish are cool with it. They got their own defense system. Throughout the day, carp fish chill inside sea cucumbers and only come out at night to get some food. But why not pick a less quirky checkpoint? Well, it's pretty simple. Where these fish hang out, there aren't too many underwater reefs or other spots that would make good hideouts, so they've got to improvise. Essentially, the phrase having to improvise sums up much of the behavior of animals in the wild. Some have to put in effort to find food, while others have to avoid being eaten. Here we have the latter case. When people see this, they usually think the bobcat's in trouble. Anyone would be in trouble if they ended up on top of a huge cactus, but in reality, this is just a regular practice. Bobcats are known for their ability to climb cacti up to 65 feet tall to escape predators, because no sane predator would climb a cactus after a bobcat. Actually, nobody would climb there in the first place. It's a great safe zone. These climbs often occur in the deserts of Arizona. Bobcats are skilled climbers, and their strong paws essentially protect them from prickly thorns. Chances are the animal didn't even notice it was climbing on something prickly. To a bobcat, whether it's a tree or a cactus doesn't matter, as long as it serves their purpose. The positioning of needles on a cactus is key. It's designed to make it easy for bobcats to climb without the risk of getting pricked. Quick climbs happen when bobcats need to get away from mountain lions, coyotes, or even humans. However, this habit of climbing up high sometimes leads to trouble. In Florida, they spotted a bobcat perched on top of a power line pole, and it seemed like it had no plans of coming down. It didn't even try, and folks couldn't figure out what to do. Their attempts to use a pole to coax the creature down looked pretty ridiculous, to be honest, especially the bobcat's reaction. Like, seriously? Eventually, the animal climbed down by itself and disappeared into the nearby woods. You know, maybe people were too hasty here. It's known that bobcats can stay on cacti for around 5 hours, sometimes longer, before going down. Maybe they should have just left the bobcat alone and waited a bit. All done watching? Mind giving it a like? Thanks. See you later.